I'm thrilled to have Cheng. Please, welcome Cheng.
All right, so last summer, I launched the Kickstarter project to fund my first novel. And how this book started was in 2009, in the summer of 2009, I started a company with a couple friends. And not long before that, I had left my job in advertising because I wanted to make things rather than things that helped sell other things. And right around the time our company started, I sat down and in my daily journaling practice, I started working on this book. And I worked on it in my spare time on nights and weekends for about 3 years. And what I found was that during the day, while we were growing and we were managing our company and all the emotions and stress and challenges that we were facing, they ended up finding their way into the book. And so writing really became, for me, a form of therapy. It became a way for me to work out some of these things that I was dealing with. And when I finished the first draft of this book, I sent it out to some literary agents, about a dozen total. And a few months later, I had just not heard back from most of them. And the few that I did hear back from, I got standard rejection letters. And I just took it to mean that my book wasn't very good yet. And around this time, I was also learning a lot about the publishing industry and about how that worked. And so typically you go through a literary agent and you find an agent and sign a contract with an agent, and then you go with the agent and you send your manuscript to editors. And there are multiple levels of gatekeeping in publishing. So what I was learning that even if you had a completed book and you sold it into a publishing house, it could take 18 months from the time where you sold it to when the book came out on store shelves, sometimes even longer. And coming from startups and technology, that just seemed ridiculous. And along the way, in the process of writing, I also realized that this wasn't going to be the last book that I wrote, that I could see myself doing this writing thing for a very long time. So I started thinking of the book as a learning experience. And it was my goal to come at it with a startup mentality and to really iterate through it as quickly as possible and learn as much as possible about both writing and publishing. So I decided to do it through Kickstarter. And the project was funded last summer. I designed and typeset the book myself. I hired a freelance editor to work with and coded the ebook. And all that happened within a span of 9 months. And so the book came out in April. And you can find it pretty much anywhere online. And so what I really wanted to talk to you guys today was about what I've been thinking about and what I've been going through since the book has come out. Now, through the Kickstarter process, I met a literary agent in the UK, and we were communicating back and forth. And after the book was completely finished, I decided to work with her to try to sell foreign rights overseas, mostly in the UK, as another means of distribution, getting the book out there. And so I wanted to show you guys some of the responses we've gotten from editors. Again, these are mostly in the UK. Now, coming from design, like clean and functional and sincere are 3 things that you strive for. And the reason I show these is to underscore what a lot of us already know about traditional publishers, right? They're in the business of making hits. And it's not enough for an editor to just really to connect with your book. They have to really wholeheartedly love it and believe that there is a large audience for the book. And so, my book was mainly intended for people like me who were working in design, technology, advertising. And as there's consolidation in publishing and in other industries, a really great thing happens is because of the mergers and because of the tightening grip over the gatekeeping, what happens is the talent in those industries gets unlocked. You can hire editors. More editors go freelance. You can hire designers. And the ability to wrangle those resources, I think, is becoming more and more important. Now, I'd like to believe that this is something that we really value and we really, as a culture, feel is important and is essential. But when we talk about financial stability and we talk about art, there's something that we don't usually talk about, not on the same level. And it's not even the elephant in the room. I think it's more like the ambient noise in the room, and that it's always there, it's always kind of in the background. And we have to consciously listen for it. We have to consciously notice it. And that's fame. And related to this is this need for validation and this need to achieve success and this desire and thirst for success. And I think it's good to honor examples of success, but we shouldn't worship them. We shouldn't worship them because they can be distorting. And this is something that is really messy and really complicated and really entangled in everything. And as an example, I want to talk about this guy who's been in the news recently. And this guy had a very complex relationship with those three things, with making art, with financial success, financial stability, and with fame. And so after J.D. Salinger published Catcher in the Rye, he basically disappeared into a small town in New Hampshire. And he kept a small circle of 7 or 8 people that he trusted in and that were confidants. And he kept writing, but he stopped publishing. And these are things that J.D. Salinger had. And it's considered one of the greatest tragedies and one of the greatest disappointments and mysteries in 20th century fiction. And I think that to start to understand this and to start to untangle all of this, you have to look at the value of Catcher in the Rye, not just for readers and not just for society, but for Salinger himself. Now, J.D. Salinger, he wrote this book while he was in World War II, and his job was a counterintelligence officer. So he was embedded in an infantry regiment in New York, or not in New York, in Europe, and it was his job to go during the Allied invasion into a town and to interview the local townspeople and to try to sniff out any Nazi sympathizers that might have been hiding in their midst. So it was his job to identify and weed out the thing that Holden Caulfield hates the most, which is phonies. And if you start looking at the letters that he wrote to his editors and the people that he communicated with during that time, you'll start to see, I think, that Catcher in the Rye was this talisman for him, that the pages of that manuscript stormed the beaches of Normandy, they paraded down the streets of Paris, and they were on him as he witnessed the atrocities in Nazi death camps. And this book and his writing was a way for him to understand and come to terms with the suffering that he was enduring and that he was witnessing during the war. And if you look at his writing before and after World War II and before and after Catcher in the Rye, you'll see this recurrent theme of him trying to work through all of the suffering that he witnessed and felt. And I think that the reason that J.D. Salinger stopped publishing, but he kept writing, is that he saw what fame was doing to him. He saw that it was distorting him. And this is something that doesn't just happen to the mega successful and the mega famous. It's something that happens to all of us, whether we're famous to 10 people, 1,000 people, or 100 million. How many people here have ever posted a photo to Instagram of something that they thought was really, really great, but that ended up not getting as many likes? Right? And how many people have posted something that they thought was just okay, but that got a ton of likes? Right? And I think the trouble with fame and with success and worshiping success is that you start to base your validation and base your value on other people's expectations. And you start to take that feedback that you get from how much money you make or how many likes you get as reality, when in fact, what fame does is it creates this other sense of self, and it creates this phony that is based on this identity that doesn't always serve your own personal interest. And I think that's why Salinger stopped publishing and he kept writing, because he felt that the success of Catcher in the Rye, that the people that would show up to his doorstep asking him for answers to this book, made him feel like he was, he had this separate self that wasn't doing them justice. It's my belief that art, first and foremost, is for the development of the artist. And I think that the artist is like this Russian nesting doll, and every successive work is this shell, this husk that gets peeled away in the artist's quest to find that thing in the middle, that intangible quality, that human essence, that inner suffering that gives shape to all of the rest of his work. And I think that when we see a work of art that really resonates with us, it's because we are seeing in it some aspect of our own personal suffering. And every single person here, each one of us, we all have our own private suffering. And I think that that is the public value and the public good of art. And we talk about independence, and I think the reason that independence is so important and the reason that creative control is so important is because these things that we're making, they're reflections of us. When we make art, they're the purest mirrors of ourselves, and we see the trends and we see themes in the things we write and the music we create and the art that we make. And for someone else and for outside forces to sort of take that control away from us, it's as though, as though they're distorting these mirrors that we have. And I think that if you orient towards self-discovery and you focus on that aspect and ask yourself of everything you do, that question, is this helping me get to that inner suffering and that inner essence? Then I think it clarifies a lot of decisions that you have to make. It clarifies whether or not you should be giving up something to publish your book. And I think it cuts through a lot of the false expectations of and the sort of cherishing of success. And I consider myself, and I call myself a full-time writer, but what I actually do is I write in the mornings, and then the afternoons I take freelance work. Because that is what it takes, and that is what I need to do to go on this journey of self-discovery. And I think that if you orient around self-discovery, you start seeing these platforms, or you start seeing these means of making work as merely platforms, as different paths that each come with their own trade-offs. And I think a very valid platform that doesn't get addressed enough and doesn't get talked about enough is just having a day job and doing something in your spare time, but continuing to do that for a very long time. Like, you don't have to quit your job and go all in on your art. It's something that, if it's really about self-discovery, it's something that is healing and something that is constantly at work, and it's something that you can never do enough of. And I think that self-discovery is a lifelong process and a lifelong pursuit. And I think it's an inexhaustible pursuit. And at the end of the day, I think it's a worthy pursuit.